Okay guys, I wanted to go through step by step in video how to do the Affinity Photo Panorama assignment. This is a grade 11 assignment and let's go through this together. So I'll chunk this up into just breaking it down to separate steps. So there'll be several videos, just make sure you follow along. First off, you need to go here. If you click on that link, you should see a Google folder with all these different files in it. I'll just make this a little bit easier to see. What you can do is right click on all of them and just hit download, or you can click one at a time and you can download by right clicking, hit download. After that though, you should have a folder that has all of these images in it, and I have my folder right here. I just named it Panorama. There they all are. They should be 9. It is possible to do them with less, but you should have 9 for this assignment. So I'm just going to leave those right there. Step 2, open your files. So we're going to go to Affinity, select File, New Panorama, and then we'll go to the next step there. So File, New Panorama. Okay, and then you'll see a pop-up like this, and we're going to click add the 9 images, my TIFF folder. That's whatever folder you named it. I just named mine Panorama. Make sure you know where those go. Select those and stick them together. Preview right hand side. So we're going to hit add, stitch Panorama, then OK. So add. I made mine on my desktop, folder called Panorama. Grab those 9 images, hit open. Might take a second. Okay, there they go. They're all in there. Stitch Panorama, just like this says. As we're doing that, let's read. So you'll see the images be brought together by Affinity. It'll look like a separate images at first, but give it a minute and its Affinity engine will start putting them together. There you go. So plenty of work to be done still. First step, step 3, is to crop. But after this, obviously, we just have to hit OK. It will load up our image. Again, it might take a little time because here's where it looks like separate images. You can actually even count them. And then it's rendering it. So it's doing a lot of computer processing right now. So you got to give it time. Just let it work its magic before we get to the cropping. So you should see those lines go away here pretty quick. There you go. So that looks awesome as it is, but we're not quite done. Cropping. Oops. Step 3, crop. So you'll notice that the image might have some white spots along the edges, like up here at the very top. Sometimes down below, etc. So what we need to do is crop that out. Okay, so we're going to crop it using the crop tool, and that's right here. Use the nodes to make the crop of the image, and then hit apply. Okay, so crop. What we're going to do is, these are the nodes. I'm going to bring it down what I might do is I'm going to hit Control plus a few times just so I can zoom in and just drag that just below that line. And I'm going to go all the way over the horizontal just to make sure that you don't have white in this right hand corner. I'm going to check the bottom out. That one looks good as well. Okay, Control minus a couple times just so I can see my whole thing, and hit apply. Okay, that should just take a minute. It looked like there was a little bit of a white line, but when I zoom in, there isn't. Okay. I like to be able to see my whole image, meaning that you should see gray around the exterior. Right off the bat, I'm going to rename this one Panorama Original. Okay, really important. I'm actually going to lock that layer. You can add a layer or a lock to layers that you don't want to mess with. It doesn't mean we can't work on it. We just don't want to lose this original one. So we've done step 1, 2, and 3. Now we're going to do blocking, step 4. So you might think the image looks great, and it does, but we can improve it. We need to use a technique called blocking. The purpose of blocking is to allow us to stretch some areas of the image to correct compression, as well as give us more water at the bottom of the image. So, on the tool panel on the left-hand side, we're going to select the crop tool. We're going to drag the middle node up and the bottom node down. Okay, so crop tool, middle node up. I'm just going to try to copy what I have in my image down here. Dragged it up a little bit. And then drag this one down a little bit. Perfect. And then hit apply. Perfect. So if it looks like this, you've done it correctly. There you go. So mine looks like that. Perfect. Blocking continued, step 5. After your image looks like the one above, or like mine right here, we're now able to make some modifications. We do this by selecting the rectangle marquee tool from the tools panel on the left-hand side. There's also a keyboard shortcut for this, and that is M. So I'll try that. M. And you can see it's selected the layer right there. Now that I have that rectangle marquee tool selected, I'm going to select, drag, and create a selection roughly 1/3 up the way of the mountain towards the top of the image. You could drag from outside the canvas to ensure the selection gets all the way to the edges. The red box here in this image shows exactly where I clicked and dragged from. So it should look like this, and I'll show you what that means. I'm going to click up here. I'm making sure I'm to the left of this side and I'm higher than this side. So I'm clicking, dragging, and about 1/3 the way up the mountain. About right there. Perfect. Okay, so you can see there, that's a selection. That's like a little dancing line. Anytime you see that, you're basically telling Affinity you only want to work in that little section. So if you're trying to do something outside that selection, you have to deselect. You can hit Control D to deselect, but we don't want to do that right now. That's just like a little aside. Step 6 is we want to duplicate this selection. So on the top of the screen, select Layer menu, then Duplicate. Okay, so Layer, Duplicate. There you go. Duplicate. So you see here I have a Panorama Original, and it's locked. We have another Panorama Original, but it's not the original. That's a duplicate. So I'm going to just type in top. Okay. Panorama Top and Panorama Original. Okay. If you have your Layers tab open, which is on the right-hand side right here, sometimes it might be in Adjustments, Effects, etc. Make sure you have your layers open. That's really important. You should see that's what we just did here. From the Tools panel on the left-hand side, select the Move tool, which is a shortcut V. You will see nodes pop up. Grab the middle node and drag it up until the new layer stretches to fill the empty space. So again, making sure you're on Panorama Top. I'm going to hit V on my keyboard and see what gets selected. Right there, that one did. You could just select it, or it's best to know those shortcuts. And all I'm doing is I'm going to just drag it up. It will snap to the top if you have the snapping on. Right now it just kind of is like free flowing. I don't know exactly where it's going to snap. But if I want it to snap to that top edge, just make sure your little magnifying glass is on there. Or not magnet, sorry. There you go. So now it looks correct, but all we've done is really just stretch that image up a little bit. And it's seamless right here. That's perfect. And again, it looks a little white here, but if I zoom in, there is no white. That's kind of just an illusion there. So I want to be able to see all the way around my images. Perfect. Okay. Now, essentially, we're going to do the exact same thing, but to the water. So first, we need to deselect. Sometimes there is that little selection. Just to make sure that we don't have anything selected, we're just going to hit Control D. I was hoping just to find the shortcut if it was listed here. Select. There we go. it's under select, we can hit deselect just to make sure nothing was selected, or Control D. That makes sure there's nothing selected. That's what this is talking about. If you ever see those dotted lines from the previous step, that's it basically means you're only working in that, and we don't want to do that. So I just hit Control D or the select menu to deselect. Now it's important to go to your layers and change the names. I've already done that. I renamed this one Panorama Original, and I locked the layer, meaning I can't change it. And then I have a Panorama Top. Okay. We want to now select the Panorama Original layer, or just the Panorama layer, because that's the one we need to use for step 8. Okay, you know it's selected because it's blue, and you can actually see a selection on the screen. It's actually showing us where the original image is. Remember, we dragged that other image just a little bit higher to fill that sky, but now what we're going to do is copy the water and drag it down. And that's step 8. So make sure you're on the panoramic layer, and I renamed mine Panorama Original, and not on the Panorama Top layer. Very important here. It won't work if you don't do this step. Then on the left-hand side, in the Tools menu, select the Rectangle Marquee tool. I should have an L there. So Rectangle Marquee tool, if you're not sure, it's just a little square. If you hover over it as well, it should tell you what it is. So I'm just leaving my mouse there, and it's now telling me Rectangle Marquee tool, and the shortcut is M. There we go. So this time what we're going to do is make a selection of the water and the bottom of the image. So this is exactly where I selected. I'm just going to make that a new tab so you can see it. Make it a little bit bigger. So you can see there, I clicked and dragged over here and selected pretty much all of the water. Okay, I'll just make that a little bit smaller again. Here we go. So it doesn't matter what side you start off on. I'll just click down here. Again, make sure you're to the left of the side over here and below this line over here. And I'm just going to make, I just want to make sure that I get most of the water. That looks pretty good. Again, I just want to move this over so I can see my whole image. Now you have those dancing lines, and if that were selected and we were trying to do another step, we'd have to deselect it first. Excuse me. Okay, so we're ready to move on. After you've made that selection and you have the dancing dotted lines, go to the layer menu and duplicate. And that's shown above as well, because it's the same as the previous step. So layer and then duplicate. Perfect. You should see a new one pop up. Again, don't be confused. If you look at the little preview here, this one is really big, and remember we locked the original. So this one that went in the middle is actually the bottom. Very important. And so I just clicked on the name, changed it, and what I also want to do is I'm going to drag it down. Okay, and we want to get rid of these dotted lines, and if we hit Control D, that will do that. No more dancing lines. Or we can also go to select, deselect. Okay, once it's duplicated, we're going to move it to the bottom, just like we did the top. So make sure you have the correct one selected, which is Panorama Bottom. Move tool, which is V. You should only have this selected, and just drag it to the bottom. It snaps because I have the magnet on. There we go. Perfect. So you can see there's this little line here. Don't worry about that just yet. We're going to blend that away later on. It kind of looks like there's a little white there, but if I zoom in, oh, there is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag it just a little bit past. Just like that. And that gets rid of that. Perfect. Awesome. Okay, your image should look like this, and it does. Okay, now that you have that selected, what we're going to do is we're going to change the perspective a little bit. So step 9, again, this looks pretty good, but we're not quite done yet. So you need to go to the left-hand side menu and grab the perspective tool. It's kind of hidden underneath the mesh warp tool. To activate it, just hold down and it will show what's underneath. So anytime you see a little arrow, a white arrow like this, click on it and you'll see that there's things hiding underneath. So I just selected the mesh tool. The assignment says click on the show grid, and there we go. So we've activated it, and you saw that it showed up with that grid. Anytime, yeah, I just did that tip there. Anytime you see that little white arrow, that means there's something hiding underneath. Once you get more familiar with Affinity, it becomes really obvious as well. All right, it says to check show grid. Just deselect show grid like we just did. The reason why we're going to skew the water is so that the reflection looks a little bit more accurate. And that's in step 10. So step 10 says we're going to do this by grabbing the bottom right hand and left hand nodes and pulling them slightly toward the outside to create an angle of the reflection. After moving the nodes outward, hit apply to commit the changes. Okay, so I'm going to grab this one, and you can see here that it hides a little bit more, like you can see the angle being created. I'm going to move this over just a little bit more. And awesome. Okay, and here's where we're going to get rid of this line. See how we have this little black line kind of running all the way through? Now that I've kind of dragged those a little bit beyond, that looks good. I'm going to hit apply like it says, but I'm going to drag this bottom layer back above that layer. Let's see if I can put it to the top. Yeah, if we put it to the top layer, it gets rid of it altogether. What I like about Affinity Photo is it gives you a preview anytime you're moving something around. Okay, so you don't have to do that because we're going to get rid of it later anyway. It's just something I did. So I'm going to stop the video there, and we'll move on from here. Actually, we'll just do that deselect. So potentially there could still be a selection on screen. So what we would do is hit select, deselect. There we go. Okay, so there we go. That's all done. Perfect. So we're at step 12, and I'll start a new video for that.